Muhammad Ali was a cultural icon as much as he was a sports figure.
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean, like, multiply that by 100, to get to where he was.
He was very, very unique. And his opposition to the Vietnam War made him a hero to many Americans.
Well, I always say he was my childhood hero, and he was my childhood hero as Cassius Clay. The very first live prize fight I ever attended was Cassius Clay versus Sonny Liston, February 25, 1964, in Miami Beach.
Oh, you were there for the first fight.
I saved lawn mowing and car washing money for months to buy a ticket that in my memory was $100, but I don't really know for sure what the cost of that ticket was. I didn't save it. It would be worth millions now. And my mother took me over from our crappy Southwest Miami tract house rental and dropped me off at the Miami Beach Convention Center, and then came and picked me up afterward. And I went in alone. And that was the first live.
How old were you?
I was 14.
14.
It was the first live prize fight I had ever attended. It was all about my hero worship for Cassius Clay.
Yeah.
2 days later, he stands on Brickell Avenue in Miami and tells two reporters that he's a follower of the Nation of Islam, and now his name is Muhammad Ali. And I'm in shock, okay? What do you mean? I mean, you're Cassius Clay. You can't.
Right.
And so nowadays I say the lesson he taught me then was a man's identity is his own.
Yes.
And it does not matter how much I love him or cherish him or feel connected to him. He has the right to say who he is. I mean, back in those days, Islam?
Right.
What is that?
Right.
I had no clue. But, he got over with me on that when I understood it was his right. Then he taught me my stance on the Vietnam War. My mother was double widow of two United States military heroes. I grew up with a basement filled to the gills with memorabilia from their tours of duty as B-20, B-17, B-24, and B-29 pilots in World War II. So there was nationalistic and patriotic material all over my household.
Wow.
And when Ali said what he said about Vietnam, that moved the meter for me in that regard. And I understood. And eventually my mother said, you'll go to Canada before I'll ever allow you to accede to being drafted into the Army and going to Vietnam, because her thought was that it was a pointless war.
Yeah, and she was correct. Yeah.
She was right.
Yeah, and they took 3 years of his prime. That's what's crazy. I always point to the Cleveland Big Cat Williams fight.
That was his best.
Yes.
You're totally right. That was his number one performance, and he was never 100% the same after that. But he still had his mind.
Yes, but he didn't train for 3 years. That's part of the problem.
Of course.
And, at 30 years old, in that day and age, it was just a different world. Like, you don't train for 3 years.
Not as much knowledge of nutrition.
Right.
Not as much knowledge of training techniques, the old-fashioned stuff in Deer Lake, Pennsylvania, not the same as now, no hyperbaric chamber,
right,
et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, they just robbed him. They robbed us, too, because he came back and he's a different fighter then. He was much more easy to hit, and, he became... he relied on his chin more, and, he didn't have the fleet of foot movement that he had before then.
But he found a way to rise to the top again.
Yes, he did. Well, the championship mind was always there.
That's 100% correct.
But as a fan of boxing, it drives me crazy. Because you imagine what we could have seen in those 3 years if Ali had never been robbed, never took his title away, and allowed him to fight all those guys like Joe Frazier, George Foreman, all those guys with keeping the same skills that he had when he was younger.
But, and I think you're 100% correct, Joe, but isn't it, in a perverse way, a part of his mystique?
Yes.
The fact that he was able to come back from those 3.5 years off, the fact that he was able to rise to the top again, the fact that he was able to beat Foreman the way he beat Foreman, and beat Frazier in the third fight in the kind of fight you would never have imagined him being in.
Right.
All these things combine to create the unique mystique of
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And then also the tragic ending, you know, the staying in too long and too many beatings, you know, the seeing him at the end of his life was just so horrible, you know, and we all know that was trauma induced. We all know that. And it was just sad to see.
We haven't seen that yet in MMA, right?
No, not quite. But you're seeing some damage. You're seeing some guys that are really struggling. You know, they're not as public, so you're not seeing it from a George St. Pierre or someone like that. George is one of the very unique former champions who has all of his wits, his faculties, retired as champion, very healthy.
Roy Jones.
Roy Jones is a good example.
Yeah.
And Roy famously, after Gerald McClellan was hurt when the Nigel Benn fight, he was really concerned because Gerald McClellan was the guy that a lot of people thought was a giant threat to Roy.
For a long period of time when Roy and I were working together, he was providing helpful financial support to McClellan's sisters who were caring for Gerald and, keeping him alive on a daily basis. I think in Illinois or Ohio, someplace like that. But, Roy loved all other fighters, and he did what he could to help with McClellan.
I know that loss that McClellan had and the subsequent medical issues, the stroke and the aneurysm, all that stuff really disturbed Roy and made him think, about getting out early.
100%.